Welcome, bienvenidos, benvindu, to the Soccermetrics Copa Libertadores show, part of the SDH network. The only English language show devoted to South America's premier club competition. I'm your host, Howard Hamilton, the founder of Soccermetrics. The 2025 Copa Libertadores is now in the rearview mirror, and the 2026 season has begun. The entry list for next year's competition is almost complete, and the draw for the preliminary rounds of the 26 Libertadores has already taken place. In this episode, I'll tell you who will be playing Libertadores football in 2026, run down the draw for the preliminary rounds, and say farewell to the 2025 Libertadores season with my best 11 and my review of the season. But before I talk about all that, I turn your attention to the Intercontinental Cup. Flamengo took off for Qatar immediately after finishing the Brasileirão and 1 week after winning the Copa Libertadores title. They played a total of 3 matches in Qatar. The first match was the Derby of the Americas versus CONCACAF Champions Cup winner Cruz Azul. They defeated Cruz Azul 2-1 on December 10. That result allowed them to advance to what was effectively a semi-final of the Intercontinental Cup final, but in this format of the competition was known as the FIFA Challenger Cup. In this match, Flamengo would play Pyramids FC of Egypt, the African Champions League winner. They defeated Pyramids 2-0 on December 13. The stage was set for the Intercontinental Cup final, PSG versus Flamengo. And in this final, PSG and Flamengo would finish 1-1 after 120 minutes of play. And PSG would go on to win the penalty kick shootout by 2-1. It was a rather odd penalty kick shootout in that only 3 of the penalty kick takers were successful. 6 of the 9 penalties were missed, 1 went over the crossbar, and the other 5 were saved by either Flamengo or PSG goalkeepers. Agustin Rossi did his job. He saved Barcola's penalty in the 4th round to give Flamengo a chance, but Luis Araujo had his penalty kick saved by Safanov in the 5th and final round. Safanov would go on to make a total of 4 saves in the penalty kick shootout. So Flamengo finished runners-up in the Intercontinental Cup final. Still a successful year for them by any measure. They won the state tournament, they won the Brasileirão, they won Libertadores, they defeated Chelsea in the Club World Cup. The only consolation for their result in the Intercontinental Cup is that they miss out on a $5 million bonus that CONMEBOL had offered the team. But still, a wildly successful season for the Red and Black in 2025. Now, with that complete, we turn to the entry list for the 2026 Copa Libertadores. We now know 46 of the 47 teams that will participate in South America's premier club competition next year. The 46th team was revealed a couple of nights ago through the results in the Copa Bolivia. The Copa Bolivia final will take place during Christmas week and will be between Nacional Potosí and Bolivar. Because Bolivar already qualified for Libertadores, Nacional Potosí will take the berth reserved for the Copa Bolivia winner. That leaves one more team to be revealed, and that will be the result of the Copa do Brasil final between Vasco da Gama and Corinthians. This is a 2-leg final. The first leg of the final ended goalless. The second and decisive leg will take place on December 21st. So either Corinthians or Vasco da Gama will take the 47th and final berth in the Copa Libertadores next year. And who are these 46 teams? Let's run through them in alphabetical order of the country. Starting with Argentina. Topping the list for Argentina is Club Lanús. They will participate in Copa Libertadores as the holders of Copa Sudamericana. Joining them in the group stage will be Platense, who won the Apertura tournament, Estudiantes de La Plata, who won the Clausura, Independiente Rivadavia, who won the Copa Argentina. They'll be participating in the tournament for the first time, along with Platense, and Rosario Central, and Boca Juniors. All of these teams will be playing in the group stage of the competition. In the second preliminary round will be Argentinos Juniors, and they enter this tournament being the third best team on aggregate points during the league season. Turning to Bolivia, as I mentioned, the four teams are known. In the group stage will be Always Ready and Bolivar. Entering the competition in the second preliminary round, Nacional Potosí. And entering in the first preliminary round, The Strongest. Now turning to Brazil. And the holders of Copa Libertadores, Flamengo, will enter the competition directly in the group stage. They'll be joined by the Copa do Brasil winner, either Vasco da Gama or Corinthians, and the top four teams in the league other than Flamengo: Palmeiras, Cruzeiro, Mirassol, and Fluminense. Mirassol entering the competition for the very first time. Newly promoted Mirassol, I should point out. Entering the competition in the second preliminary round are Bahia and the 2024 winners, Botafogo. Moving on to Chile. The two teams that grabbed the group stage berths representing Chile are Coquimbo Unido, the champions of the Primera División, and Universidad Católica, the runners-up. Entering the competition in the second round of the preliminary stage are O'Higgins and Huachipato, the Copa Chile winners. Now, Colombia. Entering the group stage from Colombia are Santa Fe, the Apertura champions, and Junior, the Clausura champion. Entering the competition in the second preliminary round are Deportivos Tolima, the aggregate best team in Primera A, and Independiente Medellin, the aggregate second place team in Primera A. Ecuador is the other country where the identity of the berths for Libertadores are not yet known, but we know which teams are contending for the two remaining berths. We know that Independiente del Valle will enter the group stage as Serie A champions. We also know that Universidad Católica will enter the first stage of the preliminary rounds as finalists of Copa Ecuador. What is left to be resolved is who will enter the group stage as second place in Serie A and who will enter the competition in the second preliminary round as the third place team. Now, in the final round of competition in Ecuador's Liga Pro, the most relevant matches that will decide second and third place are between Independiente del Valle and Barcelona. That match will be hosted at IDV. And Liga de Quito hosting Universidad Católica. If Barcelona win or Liga de Quito lose, Barcelona will finish the competition in second place. Liga will finish in third. It becomes more interesting if Barcelona fail to win and Liga win, or if Barcelona lose and Liga draw. In those two situations, Liga de Quito would finish in second place, and Barcelona would drop down to third place and into the second preliminary round. All to play for in the final round of Ecuador's Liga Pro Serie A this weekend. Now turning to Paraguay, where the two teams that will enter the competition in the group phase are Cerro Porteño and Libertad. Entering the competition in the second round of the preliminary stage is Guarani, and entering the first round of the preliminary stage is Segunda de Mayo as winners of Copa Paraguay. They're a new team in this competition. Now turning to Peru, where Universitario once again are champions of Peru's Liga Uno. They'll be joined by Cusco, who finished in second place in Liga 1 playoffs. Entering the competition in the second preliminary round is Sporting Cristal, and entering the competition in the first preliminary round, Alianza Lima. Alianza Lima, you might remember, advanced all the way out of the preliminary stage last year, just narrowly missing out on a place in the knockout stage. From Uruguay, the big two teams in Uruguay advanced to the group stage, Nacional and Peñarol. Entering the competition in the second preliminary round are Liverpool, and entering the competition in the first preliminary round, Juventud. They were the second best aggregate team in Uruguay's Primera. They will also be making their Copa Libertadores debut. And finally, in Venezuela, the two teams advancing to the group stage will be Universidad Central, champions of Venezuela's Primera División, and Deportivo La Guaira, the best aggregate team in Primera. Entering the competition in the second preliminary round, Carabobo, and entering the competition in the first preliminary round, Deportivo Táchira. So we will have 5 newcomers to Copa Libertadores in 2026. Platense, Independiente Rivadavia, Mirasol, Segunda de Mayo, and Juventud. Now, these 19 of these teams will participate in the preliminary round of next season's competition. And the draw for that competition, or the draw for that phase of the competition, took place on December 18. Now, these are two-legged ties, aggregate score, no away tiebreaker. And if the aggregate scores level after the second leg, the match or the tie will immediately be decided on penalty kick. Another thing to mention is that the teams that will be listed in each pairing are the teams that will host the second leg. The first round matchups are now set. In matchup A1, we have the strongest of Bolivia hosting Deportivo Táchira in the second leg. In A2, Juventud of Uruguay versus Universidad Católica of Ecuador. And in A3, Segunda de Mayo of Paraguay versus Alianza Lima of Peru. Now, the 3 winners of the first preliminary round will advance to the second preliminary round, in which they will be joined by 13 teams across 4 tracks. And these tracks contain 2 pairings. The winners of those 2 matchups in the second preliminary round will face each other in the third preliminary round. And the team with the higher CONMEBOL rank will host the second leg. So let's run over all 4 of these tracks. In track 1, the first matchup is the winner of the Juventud versus Universidad Católica first round matchup versus Guarani of Paraguay. They will face the winner of Liverpool versus Independiente Medellín. Now, in track 2, the winner of the strongest versus Deportivo Táchira will face Deportes Tolima in the second round. Joining them in this track is the matchup between O'Higgins of Chile and Bahia of Brazil. In track 3, the winner of the Segundo de Mayo versus Alianza Lima matchup will face Sporting Cristal. Joining them in this track is Carabobo versus Huachipato of Chile. In track 4 is the only matchup that does not contain the survivor of the first preliminary round. In the first matchup, either Liga de Quito or Barcelona will face Argentinos Juniors. And in the second matchup of this track, Nacional Potosí of Bolivia will face Botafogo. In the first round of the preliminary phase, the first leg will take place on the 3rd of February. The second leg will take place on the 10th. In the second round, the matchups will take place on the week of the 17th and the week of the 26th of February. The matchups of the third round will take place the week of March 3rd and the week of March 12th. So long way to go between now and preliminary stage, but it happens really quickly over a period of 6 weeks. And now turn our attention back to 2025 with a review of the tournament. Firstly, reviewing the best players of the competition, and then reviewing the tournament as it progressed from the preliminary round all the way to. And we start with my best 11 of the 2025 Libertadores. The formation that I chose was a 4-1-3-2 formation. So in addition to a goalkeeper, a backline of 4 with a single holding midfielder, a midfield line of 3 players, and 2 forwards. And I chose 2 forwards to really highlight the contribution of two players who made significant contributions to their team in this tournament. This was a tournament in which there were multiple players who got on the score sheet quite a lot, and I wanted to note their contributions here. So in goal was Agustin Rossi. I think that's a no-brainer. He had 10 clean sheets. He played every minute for Flamengo in this competition. The defensive line, from left to right, Joaquin Piqueres of Palmeiras, Leo Pereira of Flamengo, Gustavo Gomez of Palmeiras, and Guillermo Varela of Flamengo. In the holding midfield role was Santiago Sosa of Racing Club. The midfielders, Andreas Pereira of Palmeiras, Gerson of Flamengo, and Jorge de Arrasqueta of Flamengo. And lastly, up front, the forwards, Adrian Martinez of Racing Club, and Jose Lopez of Palmeiras. It's a best 11 that is dominated by 3 of the 4 teams that advanced to the semifinals of Libertadores. Racing Club, Palmeiras, and Flamengo. And needless to say, Flamengo, the winners of the competition, placed the majority of players in this best 11. Now, the young player of the season. And this is a designation that is new for this podcast. My criteria for young player of the season was that it would be a player under the age of 21 as of the end of this year. There were several players that fit this criteria. Almost all of the players have since gone to Europe. Esteval immediately comes to mind as someone on the short list for young player of the season. And he was definitely part of my short list. The player who I chose was Franco Mastantuono of River Plate. Mastantuono has since gone on to Real Madrid. He started to see more significant playing time under Xavi Alonso. He stood out not only for his creative ability, for his goal scoring ability, but he has also stood out through his absence. River Plate has been a very different side with Mastantuono absent. I think that's been apparent not only in Libertadores, but also River's play in Argentina's Primera División. So Mastantuono is my choice for Young Player of the Season. For overall Player of the Season, there's only one player who this designation could have gone to, and that's Georgian de Arrascaeta. It's been his best season since joining Flamengo. He he's been among the goal scoring leaders, not only in the Brasileirão but in the Copa Libertadores. He was one of two players who scored multiple goals for the Red and Black in Libertadores play. He was the team leader in expected assists. He was among the top 10 expected assists. He was among the leading players in final third entries. He was a dominant presence in midfield. His presence was also felt when he was not present in midfield for Flamengo. A worthy recipient of Player of the Season. He was CONMEBOL's Player of the Season. He will almost certainly be South American Player of the Year. Georgian de Arrascaeta is my choice for best player in the competition. For manager of the season, there were a couple of contenders. I think the coach for Liga de Quito deserves some credit. Although that was really a stopgap measure because they had changed coaches at the end of the group stage. Gustavo Costas was also on the short list for manager of the season through the job that he did at Racing Club. My choice for manager of the season has to go to Felipe Luis of Flamengo. Just 40 years old. This was really his first major managerial role since retiring as a player. He has almost single-handedly rehabilitated the image of Brazilian football managers in South America. He'll be a bit more modest about that and say that there are other coaches who are up and coming in Brazil who deserve the credit. But he has already stood out through his squad management, through the defensive solidity of his team. Defense really carried Flamengo to this title. And he represents probably the most positive side of Brazilian football management. So Felipe Luis is my choice for manager of the season. And so let's look back on the 2025 Libertadores. And the overriding question for this competition, as it has been for previous years of this competition, has been, will it merely be the Brasileirão Invitational, or will other teams crash this, this green and yellow party? Starting the preliminary round, it really started with a bang. Alianza Lima knocking out Boca Juniors. The first time Boca Juniors had ever failed to advance to the group stage of Copa Libertadores. Corinthians falling at the last hurdle. And the preliminary round stood out for Bolivian teams reverting to the mean. In 2024, we saw not only a couple of Bolivian teams advancing to the knockout round of Libertadores, but also winning their respective groups. We didn't see anything like that this season. And when we turn to the group phase was characterized by minnows, particularly the exploits of Central Cordoba in Group C, defeating Flamengo at the Maracanã. The first Argentine team to do that in almost 40 years. Sadly falling short on the final match day. Not really because of lack of effort on their side, but more the favorites of that group reverting to form. We saw perfection by Palmeiras. Went 6 for 6 in the group stage, 6 wins out of 6 matches. Just the fifth side to do that in the history of group stage play in Libertadores. And lamentably, we saw fan violence. Colo Colo versus Fortaleza, police response to the gates being bum rushed by Colo Colo Barras, resulting in the deaths of two youths. In Brazil, an internal dispute between members of the same Barra, and not even a Brazilian club. It was a Colombian club, Atlético Nacional. Two more people were killed. CONMEBOL's punishment was swift and severe in the case of the Chilean clubs. Colo 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 saw their gates closed for the remainder of the competition. They were banned from their away fans appearing at their matches, or away fans of Colo Colo could appear at Colo Colo matches. They faced heavy financial penalties. This is part of a growing trend, a really dark trend among Chilean clubs in South American competition. Universidad de Chile received significant fines and penalties from CONMEBOL. But what can you do about internal conflicts between members of the same gang? I'm not going to say fan group, the same gang, far away from the stadium. What can you do about that? That is just the dark side of the dark side of fandom in South America, and it's something that requires eternal vigilance. But we turn to the knockout draw, and the one question that came out of the knockout draw was, what would prevent a Flamengo versus Palmeiras final? There were pretenders to the throne, such as River Plate, who ran into trouble the instant they were drawn against a Brazilian challenger, Sao Paulo, and defending champions Botafogo. Botafogo fell short against Liga de Quito. Sao Paulo had a really disappointing knockout stage campaign. And then the contenders of this competition. Racing Club, with Adrian Martinez up front, Santiago Sosa in holding, Marcos Rojo in defense, Facundo Cambesas in goal, who made that starting goalkeeper job his and played his way onto the Argentina national team, and led on the touchlines by Gustavo Costas. A great win over Penharol with basically the last kick of the game, last deflection of the game. Comprehensive victory over Vélez Sarsfield. Probably deserved more against Flamengo. It was there to be won. That would have meant everything to everyone connected with Racing Club. They hadn't been to a Copa Libertadores final since 1967. It would have been absolutely orgasmic. It would have been absolutely amazing for their fanatical supporters. And Racing Club have a lot of supporters in Argentina and all over South America. And then Liga de Quito. Yes, they had the advantage of altitude, and they took full advantage of that altitude advantage. They finished their home program with a perfect record. The tie versus Sao Paulo was particularly impressive in that they won both home and away. And that was something very interesting about this team. We hear a lot about clubs in either Bolivia, Colombia, or Ecuador that play altitude and are very strong at altitude and are paper tigers at sea level or anything below 1,000 meters. Liga de Quito wasn't quite like that. They played well against Botafogo on the road. They kept it close enough to overturn it at home. They played extremely well against Sao Paulo, winning both matches at the tie. Brian Ramirez, Gabriel Villamil in midfield, Luciano Alzugaray up front. This was a really solid lineup. And as I said, the manager really did a good job of riding the ship at the end of the group stage, and giving Palmeiras a fright. They dealt Palmeiras their only loss in Libertadores 2025 with that 3-0 victory at home. And that was a win that made you think, maybe this Brasileirão Invitational, can be gate crashed by a non-Brazilian side. Maybe instead of a Flamengo Palmeiras final, we should get used to a Racing versus Liga de Quito final. And then the second legs happened, and everything turned back to normal. Flamengo, through a defensive masterclass in the second leg, ground out a goalless draw that saw them advance to the final. Palmeiras took advantage of not just their own offensive onslaught, but also, in my opinion, a catastrophic setup by Liga de Quito's manager in the second leg that allowed them to overturn a 3-0 deficit. So Palmeiras advanced to the final with a historic result. No team had ever overturned a 3-0 result in knockout play of this competition. So we get to the final. And let's first talk about the Women's Libertadores. I know women's football in South America gets ignored, and I'm trying to do something different through this podcast by talking about Women's Libertadores. So the Women's Libertadores took place over a period of 3 weeks. We can talk about how fair it is on the players, and that's definitely a conversation worth having, but this is where South American club football is right now. Corinthians were once again champions. They have won this tournament 6 times. Brazilian teams have won all but 3 of the Women's Libertadores editions. In this season, Corinthians were pushed harder than they had been in the past. They only won the final via penalty kick shootout versus a Deportiva Cali side that was defensively solid. Colombia continues to be a challenger to Brazilian hegemony in the women's game of South American football, on the national team side and increasingly on the club side. But it's only a matter of time before those players of Deportivo Cali not only get picked up by Brazilian challengers, but also get noticed by clubs in Europe and North America. And now turning to the men's final. This was the final we had anticipated between Flamengo and Palmeiras. It was exactly what we expected. It was a matchup between the top 2 teams in Brazil and the top 2 teams in South America. It wasn't a classic, and it was fitting that the goal happened from a set piece. Danilo's only shot taken in Libertadores this season was the shot that won the cup for Flamengo. So Flamengo won their tetra. They are now the only Brazilian side to have won South America's premier club competition 4 times. It's a victory for the Red and Black. It's a personal victory for Agustin Rossi, who won a title after leaving Boca Juniors to ply his trade in Brazil, really cementing the case that he is the best goalkeeper in South America. It's a personal victory for Georgian de Arrasqueta, finishing up a career year for the Red and Black. It's a personal victory for Felipe Luis, showing that Brazilian managers, particularly the newer generation of Brazilian managers, can make significant contributions and can be successful. And it's important to note that success was the result of a long-term program and patience by the by the Flamengo staff. Now, early success contributed to his stability, but stability is something that is in short supply in football management throughout South America and in Brazil in particular. Through the achievements of Felipe Luis, I think that he has shown that another way is possible. Now, the question for 2026, can anyone prevent a Brazilian winner? Or even, can anyone prevent an all Brazilian final? We usually expect a large team, a big name team to become this challenger to the larger Brazilian sides. But take a look at the teams that will not be present in Copa Libertadores in 2026. Clubs such as Colo-Colo, River Plate. River Plate will not be in the competition for the first time in over 10 years. Racing Club, the semifinalists, they fell short in the Clausura final. And Brazilian sides such as Sao Paulo, Internacional. So if we're expecting to see big clubs that have big wallets that can purchase players and hold on to players to allow them to be challengers to the Flamengos, to the Palmeiras, that have truly become juggernauts of South American football, it seems to be in short supply. But that said, Boca Juniors will be present next season. Peñarol will be present. Independiente del Valle, Liga de Quito, those teams will be present. The bottom line is that it all starts again. And it's almost kind of cliche to say this, but it's very true. The 2026 season starts right at the final whistle of the 2025 final. And it all starts again, but all indications are that the story could be the same. And that concludes this season of the Soccermetrics Copa Libertadores show. I've done a total of 45 episodes, combining news from the competition, recaps of matchups, commentary of the latest events going on in and surrounding this competition. These episodes included a long preview of South American clubs in the FIFA Club World Cup. I didn't do as many historical vignettes this season. In fact, I only did two. One was a long and comprehensive history of Mexican clubs in Copa Libertadores from 1998 to 2016, and telling the story of Mirko Josic, the first foreign manager to win Copa Libertadores with Colo-Colo. I hope to do more historical vignettes in 2026. There are a couple of vignettes that I really want to get into that I think would be really fascinating to share with you, the listeners, that really go a long way toward conveying the richness and the history and the folklore surrounding this great tournament of South American football. It's really, Copa Libertadores is a competition that deserves to be alongside the European Champions League and the other Champions League competitions in international club football. Just because of its history, the heritage of its clubs, the achievements of their clubs at international level. And what I want to do in 2026 is continue to tell those stories and continue to share the latest news and events surrounding this competition that I find so fascinating. And, people who have helped me tell that story have been the people of Soccer Down Here. Soccer Down Here have taken on final production and distribution of each episode. One thing that I didn't realize until I saw this across my feeds is that you can find these episodes now on YouTube and Facebook. A lot of people would like to thank from Soccer Down Here. Jason Longshore, John Nelson, Scott Flood, all those people helped encourage me to continue with these episodes, who gave me timely advice and who also helped me distribute each of these episodes to you, the listeners. And I can't thank Soccer Down Here enough for their help in making the Soccermetrics Copa Libertadores show happen. So if you want to follow me and send a comment or question, my X handle is @Soccermetrics. You can also send questions or comments to Soccer Down Here or to Jason Longshore at Longshoe. This podcast will take a month off, and I will come back at the end of January to preview the preliminary rounds of the 2026 Copa Libertadores. I wish all of you a very Merry Christmas, a happy and peaceful holiday season, and a very happy New Year. It's going to be a really big year in 2026. For the last time in 2025, this has been the Soccermetrics Copa Libertadores show, proudly part of the SDH network. See you later. Hasta luego, e até mais.